Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah, and may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad and his family and his companions and all those who adhere to his guidance. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us and you a life upon His guidance, and a death while closely adhering to His guidance, and a reunion around Him, and a drink from His blessed hand, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, on the day of judgment, the day of thirst. Allahumma ameen. May Allah illuminate our minds and purify our hearts and better our character and strengthen our fraternity, our brotherhood and sisterhood. Allahumma ameen. So we welcome everyone back to our running series regarding Adabu Salaf, the manners of the Salaf, the manners of the early Muslims, في التعامل مع الناس, in particular with regards to their interpersonal relations, with regards to their dealings with one another. And in our last session, we spoke about how the Salaf had such high esteem for the scholars, how the Salaf had very high regard for the bearers of sacred knowledge, how they would celebrate the scholars as they should. So, inshallah, this session will be somewhat complementary to that. It will be the other side of that coin, which is how they dealt with those en route to scholarship, the students of the sacred sciences, but mostly on how they dealt with the scholars with regards to their humanness, their imperfection, their mistakes, their even at times conflicts with one another. A little bit of that, inshallah Azza wa Jal, as well. So first and foremost, the author says, يُكْرِمُونَ طُلَّابَ الْعِلْمِ وَيَتَلَطَّفُونَ مَعَهُمْ وَيَرْفُقُونَ بِهِمْ, that they honor the students of the sacred sciences, and they are very gentle and kind and hospitable to them. And this was the instructions of our noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, he begins with this narration, this authentic narration wherein Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, a young, studious companion of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, later on in his life when he met the students, and he became the teacher, and he met the students that would come from every corner of the world to collect what he committed to memory of the prophetic tradition, the Prophet's tradition sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Whenever he would see these students enter, he would say, "Marhaban biwasiyyati Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Kana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam yusina bikum." He would say, "Welcome, O entrustment, O you who we've been entrusted about by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam." He told us that people, when they come to you, so that you may relate to them what I left with you, honor them greatly. You know how last week or the week before we spoke about the scholars being our lifeline back to the Prophet ﷺ. Now it is the reverse. Now these students also deserve a degree of honoring because they are our potential line of extending the prophetic legacy to those after us. And it was well known that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah would give extended time with his students and honor them in a very special way, and even spend on them from his own finances. And when someone tells you that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah would spend a lot of time with his students, there's a subtlety here, that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was known to be stingy with his time, protective, very keen on every moment of his time. He valued time in a remarkable way, to the point that some people would misunderstand, or maybe they wanted to misunderstand. There's this kind and that kind of people always. And they would accuse him of being arrogant and prideful because he wouldn't socialize much with people. He wouldn't sit with people that much. Why? Perhaps if he did, he wouldn't have become Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, right? I got into my study time, and I have my devotional prayers in private time. But when it came to his students, they were the exception. This was not in the way. This was part of paving the way for the future of sacred scholarship. And before him even, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu an. And you know, the Hanafi madhab is founded in Al-Kufa, and so much of its colors were determined, its identity was shaped around the Sahaba of Al-Kufa, right? Particularly Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu an, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu an, and anybody? Who are the scholars of Al-Kufa? From the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Madani, right? That's your homework for next week. But those two are fine, because we were about to read for Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Even in the legal opinions of the Hanafi madhab, you will often find them traced back to one of those two Sahaba, right? Those are the primary two. Why? Because they had settled in Al-Kufa, and the Hanafi madhab was founded in Al-Kufa. And so Ibn Mas'ud himself, radiallahu an, one time he walked out on his colleagues, students really, while they were studying, rehearsing, reviewing with each other. Among them was Alqama and Al-Aswad and Masruq and others, great ulama to be, of the tabi'een, of the generation after the Sahaba. And so he stood over them in admiration, so pleased with how hard they were working, and he said, Bi abi wa ummi al-ulama, may my mother and my father be ransomed for the scholars. This is an expression in the Arabic language that means, you hear it a lot, even the Prophet ﷺ said it about certain people. It means, oh, I wish I could, show you how much you mean to me. If I had to trade off my parents for you, I would. It is not meant literally, but it is an expression of endearment. So he would say, Bi abi wa ummi al-ulama, may my mother and father be ransomed for the scholars. Bi ruhillahi talaftum. It was in and around the Spirit of God, right? The Spirit of Allah that you got together. Wa kitab Allahi talawtum, and the book of God you recited. Wa masjid Allahi ammartum, and the house of God you populated. You got together for God, reciting the book of God, spending your hours, long hours in the house of God. وَرَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ انْتَظَرْتُمْ, and the mercy of God you awaited. ثُمَّ أَحَبَّكُمُ اللَّهِ وَأَحَبَّ مَنْ أَحَبَّكُمْ. And so after that, I must say, may God himself love you, and may he love those who love you. Very beautiful dua he made for them. And Muhammad ibn Khalid narrates from Al-Awza'i that Yahya ibn Abi Kathir said that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the famous caliph and sultan of the early Muslims, would write to his governors, and ajru ala talabati al-ilm al-rizq wa farrighuhum lit-talab. Make sure those who are preoccupied with the sacred sciences get an automatic sponsorship from the state, so they may be dedicated entirely to this pursuit. No distractions. Clear their way. And it was said that Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah, another great Hanafi scholar, he used to make, on average, he was a great trader as well. He was a great entrepreneur, businessman. He used to make about 50,000 every year. And they say he never paid zakah in his life. Never paid charity in his life. Someone might jump to conclusion, say, astaghfirullah, like that's horrible. Why he's never paying zakah? It's because he would never hoard the money or sort of keep it. He would always spend it in the path of Allah for charitable causes, and in particular, he would love and understand the value of sponsoring scholars. So there were 6 scholars in particular, very famous names that many of you know, Hammad ibn Salama and Hammad ibn Zayd, and Sufyan al-Thawri and Sufyan ibn Uyayna, and Ismail ibn Ulayya and Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad. 6 names, you hear them in khutbahs all the time. We're always citing them for their great wisdom and the likes. He says, were it not for these 6, I would never have done business. Meaning my intention when I go into business is to keep making money, to keep sponsoring these great scholars, to free them up to serve this ummah. And Abu al-Fadl, Khatib al-Musil, rahimahullah, he says that my father reported to me that when he first went to Al-Musil, Musil is a famous city of scholarship in Iraq, Mosul in English, in the year 459, he finally reached the gatherings of Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi. Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi was, in his age, called Shaykh al-Islam. He was called the number one Shaykh, scholar, elder of all of Islam. He says, the father of Abu al-Fadl, says, and then when I got there, he welcomed me very warmly. And he said to me, Min ayna ant? Where are you from? He's inquiring, making me feel at home, showing his interest in me. He said, where are you from? So I said, me? I'm from Mosul. I'm from Iraq. So he said to me, Marhaban anta baladiyya. Welcome, we're from the same place. So I said, Ya Sayyidina, like, respected teacher, Anta min Fayruzabad. You're from Fayruzabad. You're not from Iraq. Completely different part of the world. And so he said back to me, Ama jama'atna safinatu Nuh. Weren't we together in the Ark of Noah? We came from the same place. Our ancestors were on the Ark of Nuh, the Ark of Noah, alayhi salam. He said, so I realized that this was a man of exemplary akhlaq. This man had great akhlaq. He was looking for any way to make me feel at home as here I am, a stranger in a strange land. He said, on top of his zuhd, his great disinterest and austere lifestyle, and that's why I stayed by his side and did not leave his gatherings until he died. I couldn't separate from a man like this. And Abu Uthman al-Warraq, rahimahullah, says, I once got together with the students of hadith, the students of the prophetic tradition, in the presence of Waki'. Waki' ibn al-Jarrah was a great hadith scholar that Imam al-Bukhari and others took from, and he was most famously known as one of the leading teachers and influences for Imam al-Shafi'i, the great Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah. So Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, we came to him, Abu Uthman al-Warraq and others are saying, and he was wearing a very clean, crisp white thobe, white shirt. And so the ink pot that we're using, they're writing, not him, keep that in mind. It's their ink pot. The ink pot spills on his white thobe. And so he fell silent for a minute, and then he said, Ma ahsan as-sawad fil bayad. Black looks really nice on white. I say, hey, this kind of looks good. To try to make them feel better. They're, of course, like so embarrassed that, we cross the earth to get to this man, and we get to sit in front of him. We spill our ink cup on his clothes. White clothes, of all clothes, right? And Nawfal ibn Furat, ibn Muslim, he had a gathering in the masjid of Halab, the masjid of Aleppo in Syria. And all of the students of the Islamic sciences would sit there. And among those that used to come at times that sit in his gathering was a local seller from the market outside the masjid. So there was a guy, he's on the cuff. Am I going to sort of become, like a scholar, or I'm just going to do what my parents did, right? Continue to sell in this little canteen or shop outside the masjid. And so whenever he would come to the gathering, this great scholar, Nawfal ibn Furat, he would say to the students, senior students, veteran students, أَعْطُوا أَخَاكُمْ حَظَّهُ مِنَ الْمَجْلِسِ. Make room for this man. You see what he's doing, right? He's telling him, you can also be a torchbearer of this religion. He's honoring him and saying, make room for your brother. And then once he would come close, he would sit him down, he would ask him, how are the prices today? How's the merchandise? Has it arrived from out of town? And just basically make small talk with him. And then he would go back to teaching his classes. That was just a little bit of how they would honor their students. Now let me speak about the issue of how to deal with the mistakes of the scholars, the slips of the scholars. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about scholars being an extension, in a sense, of prophethood. We've said that over and over again. Al-ulama warathatul anbiya. The hadith says the scholars are the heirs of the prophets. But in a certain sense also, they are not. Now it's time to speak about that other side. That we have to differentiate between ourselves and the scholars. Because they are our conduit, our channel to the Prophet ﷺ and the proper understanding of Allah's book. But on the other hand, we have to now differentiate not between us and the scholar, but between all of us and the scholars, and between the Prophet himself ﷺ. So some people, they are too idealistic. And so as a result of that, they dismiss the scholar and sort of disqualify their rank because they commit a mistake and they are too critical of the scholars. And so Ibn Asakir is a great historian. It is actually a very well-known, it should be more well-known, but a very well-known cautioning he gives regarding this pattern of being too critical of the scholars. Because just as one form of excess is to assume them infallible and they never make mistakes, the other form is to define them by their mistakes and demonize them because of their mistakes. So he's speaking about this other excess here, and he says, "Know, my brother," know meaning have knowledge, be certain, know, my brother, that أن لحوم العلماء رحمة الله عليهم مسمومة وعادة الله في هتك أستار منتقصيهم معلومة. It's very poetic. He says, know that the flesh of the scholars is poisonous. What does he mean? Yeah, backbiting is referred to as eating someone's flesh, right? In our texts. And so, especially the flesh of the scholar, don't you dare. He's saying, know that the flesh of the scholars is poisonous. وَعَادَةُ اللَّهِ فِي هَتْكِ أَسْتَارِ مُنْتَقِصِيهِمْ مَعْلُومًا. And the pattern of Allah, what Allah always does, regarding the exposing of those who muntaqisihim, those who disparage them, those who disrespect them, is well known. Meaning it's very well known historically what Allah always does. It's his pattern, unchanging pattern of God, to expose and humiliate those who disrespect them. And then it's a longer passage, about half a page, but he says at the very end of it, وَكُلُّ مَنْ أَطْلَقَ لِسَانَهُ فِي الْعُلَمَاءِ بِالثَّلْبِ بَلَاهُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ بِمَوْتِ الْقَلْبِ. And whomever unleashes their tongue against the scholars negatively, Allah, the Mighty and Majestic, afflicts them before their own death with the death of their hearts. Which is worse, right? Because if a person dies, they may go to paradise, they may go to the fire. May Allah grant us the first and protect us from the second. But if your heart dies, what do you meet Allah Azza wa Jal with? And then he narrated from Makhlad ibn al-Husayn, who said that some of our fellow ulama, scholars used to say that they mentioned in the presence of Al-Hasan ibn Dhakwan a man in a bad light. He mentioned some other scholar and sort of just like made a derisive, disrespectful comment about them. And so Al-Hasan ibn Dhakwan heard them saying this, and he said, "Mah, stop right there. Don't do that. لا تذكر العلماء بشيء فيميت الله قلبك." This is dangerous territory, he's telling him. Don't make such mention of a scholar, lest Allah deaden your heart. يميت الله قلبك. And then he continued to say, and know that it is feared that those who enjoy backbiting the scholars are those most likely to find themselves facing su'ul khatimah. Su'ul khatimah means having a bad end to your life. Ending your life in a way that would put you in very perilous standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah protect us and you. And he gives one example. He says there is the very famous qadi and faqih and jurist, great grand famous judge and jurist from the Shafi'i madhab, whose name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Zubaydi. He was born in the year 710 after Hijrah, so about 700 years ago. He said he wrote a commentary on the book At-Tanbih, this scholarly work. He wrote a commentary on it that spanned 24 volumes, just to give you a feel of the caliber of this man. And he taught everywhere. He educated so many people. Wa'afta, and he was well known for his fatwa prowess to give, customized religious edicts, fatwa. And his students became so plenty in the lands of Yemen, and his popularity circled the globe. And then Al-Jamal Al-Masri says, I saw him as he was dying. His tongue was hanging outside of his mouth, blackened and swollen. His tongue was blackened and swollen, hanging outside of his mouth. And people used to say that the reason for this was because of how much he used to condemn Al-Shaykh Muhyiddin al-Nawawi, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah. So perhaps they were both sort of tier 1 Shafi'i scholars, and some sort of envy got between them, at least one-sided envy. And so he used to constantly wrong Imam al-Nawawi, constantly speak bad about him, constantly try to trivialize him in people's eyes. And so perhaps this was the reason why he was afflicted in this way at his death. And Allah Azza wa Jal, of course, knows best. And Imam Tajuddin al-Subki, rahimahullah, he says, a person must remain keenly committed to adab, to proper etiquette, and know their place when it comes to the previous imams, the previous leading scholars of this deen, and to not pay any attention, he says, not pay any attention to their criticisms of each other. Why? Why not? Could be valid criticism, right? So why not pay attention to it? Because you have no way of confirming this is valid criticism. it's like imagine, two world-class boxers sort of going off at each other, and you're trying to break it up. You're trying to get in the middle. You have no place in that ring. Yes? You don't even understand what's happening, so don't put yourself under the impression that you understand, and then you go and take sides, and then they are both forgiven by Allah Azza wa Jal for being sincere in their disagreement or whatever else, and you're the one who is the only loser in the equation. This is of the major reasons why you should never do that. He said, and if you do happen to discover it, you come across it, like you're not looking for it, but then it just forces itself your way, if you are able to just interpret it in a positive light, in a charitable way, husn al-dhan, then do that. Otherwise, say there's probably an explanation I don't know about. Just ignore it and keep it moving. Because you were not created to be the judge between scholars. So busy yourself with what benefits you and mind your own business, essentially is what he's saying. I'm translating it in a 2024 paraphrase. And then he says, and don't you dare sit there and try to appraise what happened between Abu Hanifa and Sufyan al-Thawri. There was a little bit of something there, right? He says, or between Malik and Ibn Abi Dhi'b, there was some harsh words there, right? He says, or between Salih and al-Nasa'i, or between Ahmad ibn Hanbal and al-Harith al-Muhasibi, and so on and so forth until this very day and age of ours. Because if you allow yourself into that space, you will be the most likely to be destroyed of all of these names. You're going to be the one who is the casualty here. He said, and many a times, these were due to justified disagreements and sincere conclusions that they found themselves making, intellectual, honest, objective conclusions that if they're right, they get 2 rewards for, right? And if they're wrong, they still get a reward for trying. He says, and the statements of the scholars, وَلِأَقْوَالِهِمْ مَحَامِلٌ رُبَّمَا لَمْ يُفْهَمْ بَعْضُهَا فَلَيْسَ لَنَا إِلَّا التَّرَضِّ عَنْهُم. What they're saying and the technical language you're using, much of it is not to be understood, right? It is understood by specialists and specialists that understand the language of that particular generation because the language itself evolves and so on and so forth. So he's trying to give you many, many, many reasons to get off your high horse and just duck. Don't get involved in this. He said, so just your job is just to pray for them and pray that Allah be pleased with all of them. وَالسُّكُوتُ عَمَّا جَرَى بَيْنَهُمْ, and to keep silent regarding whatever may have occurred between them in moments of anger, in moments of misunderstanding, in moments even of envy. The same way we are commanded to keep silent regarding the dispute that took place between the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum. May Allah be pleased with them. And Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah, when he was, Imam al-Dhahabi is like a historic biographer. He has his work called Siyar A'lam al-Nubala. The Siyar, the biographies of A'lam al-Nubala, the most noble A'lam, Ilm, Ulama, A'lam, the most noble scholars. So this is something like 38 volumes or 24 volumes, I forget. Obviously I haven't read it. And he says in his biography that he makes of Ahmad ibn Abdullah al-Hafiz, who's Abu Nu'aym al-Asfahani, another great chronicler and historian. He says, he's the author, al-Asbahani is the author of Tarikh Asbahan. Very well-known reference in Islamic history. He says, صَدُوقٌ تُكُلِّمَ فِيهِ بِلَا حُجَّةٍ ولكن هذه عقوبة من الله لكلامه في ابن مندى بهوى. He says Al-Asbahani, he is an honest man, he's a reliable narrator. When things come through him, they are to be trusted, even if some people criticized him without any evidence. The people that criticized him didn't provide any evidence. And this is, he means probably, a punishment from Allah because he used to speak about Ibn Manda, another great scholar, Ibn Manda, based on his bias. There was a bias, a little bit of a prejudice between Ibn Manda and Al-Asbahani. And the scholars of hadith, they often used to say, Kalamul Aqrani yutwa wa la yurwa. That the statements of peers, when there's 2 people on the same level, in the same era, it is yutwa, it's to be folded away, wa la yurwa. It should not be circulated. Because, they say there's a conflict of interest. And even a scholar, at times, may fall a little weak to this conflict of interest. You're not from my sort of madhab. You're not from my fikr, my ideology, right? And so, when you like someone, it is natural. You could be the smartest person on earth, the greatest scholar on earth. When you like someone, you have this leaning to defend them even when the evidence against them is strong, right? And when you don't like someone, you want to find something against them, and so you drop your filter, right? You kind of accept, because you're quick to accept here, something that isn't even well established. That's why they say when you hate someone, a rumor about them is certainty, and when you love someone, a rumor about certainty about them is just a rumor, right? So even the scholars at times momentarily could have been susceptible to this. And of course, the early Muslims, the righteous predecessors, were not in the business of looking for the mistakes of their scholars or holding these mistakes against them. Imam al-Dhahabi, again, he says in his biography of Muhammad ibn Nasr al-Marwazi, rahimahullah, a very early scholar, he says, وَلَوْ أَنَّ كُلَّمَا أَخْطَأَ إِمَامٌ فِي اجْتِهَادِهِ فِي أَحَادِ الْمَسَائِلِ خطأ مغفورا له قمنا عليه وبدعناه وهجرناه لما سلم معنا لا ابن نصر ولا ابن مندى ولا من هو أكبر منهما. If every time a scholar is going to make a mistake, we're going to hold it against them, we're going to define them by their mistake, especially when this is a mistake based on ijtihad, scholarly discretion, then we will not have even the likes of Ibn Nasr al-Marwazi, even the likes of Ibn Manda, and even scholars bigger than them. And you know, the recent scholar, Saudi scholar, Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, rahimahullah ta'ala, he has a book about the sanctity of the people of knowledge. And he says there that if you come across some oversight for a scholar, ask yourself, are you happy about that? Like, did it make you happy that you caught something? Right? He's saying, and if you're happy, then are you happy because you found some way to distinguish yourself above this giant? Or are you happy genuinely just to correct for the world something and out of love for that scholar? Because you know, when you step away objectively, right, honestly, if you're qualified and you sort of correct something, you are actually serving the legacy of the scholar himself. He was in pursuit of truth. And so it's out of your love for him that you may sort of identify an oversight in his work, if we're actually able to do that. And they defend the scholars when others are criticizing them. There's a few beautiful citations here, very wonderful. So he begins with the hadith, not even about a scholar. There's a hadith about Al-Hudaybiyah. You know, when the Prophet ﷺ marched with the Sahaba to Mecca, and the Meccans came out and they said, you're not coming in for Umrah. What happened between that summary of a timeline is that outside of Mecca, the camel of the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Qaswa, the name of this particular camel is Al-Qaswa, it stopped and it refused to move forward. And so the Sahaba started sort of like chastising this Al-Qaswa and saying, so stubborn, so nasty, you know, this is the messenger of Allah on you, what's wrong with you, right? They're just like... And so the Prophet ﷺ defended Al-Qaswa. And he said, مَا خَلَأَتِ الْقَسْوَى. The Al-Qaswa is not being stubborn. وَمَا ذَاكَ لَهَا بِخُلُقٍ. And this is not one of the character traits of Al-Qaswa. وَإِنَّمَا حَبَسَهَا حَابِسُ الْفِيلِ. Rather what happened is that the one that held back the elephant has held her back. Who's the one that held back the elephant? Allah. When the Abraha came with the army of elephants decades prior to destroy the Kaaba, Allah did not allow the elephants to continue marching forward. So right now, Allah, for some reason, we're about to find out, is the one that is holding back this animal. And so, how do we look if we are the types of people that allow ourselves to... Brother, can you turn off your phone? It's distracting, akhi. Whoever's phone that is. Oh, maybe it's in the back. My apologies. Forgive me, akhi. Whoever's device that is, please help them turn it off. Jazakallahu khairan. I'm sure it's distracting others way more than it's distracting me. So if this is the sort of the defense of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of a camel, because this is the track record of the camel. So what do we say now about a scholar whose track record is serving the ummah, right? Traveling the world, spending time away from family, you know, getting, you know, misunderstood left and right, spending out of his own pocket, losing sleep over it. You know, like people even think traveling nowadays is like traveling a long time ago. Traveling a long time ago is a completely different monster, right? Like, you know, Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, we got on a golden platter, we have tafsir of Imam al-Qurtubi. Like, Imam al-Qurtubi has this one line where he says, you know, one time I was sort of on a trip and I woke up and I found a scorpion sort of plunging its venom into me. And then I was like, how could this happen? And I remembered that I went to sleep that night. I guess he was really tired or something. And he didn't get to say his adhkar. He didn't say, Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay. You know, in the name of Allah, doesn't allow any harm to touch something alongside His name, or any harm to take place alongside His name. This is like, you know, the travel of the past. Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, rahimahullah, he, the great student of Abu Hanifa, one of his two greatest students. There was Abu Yusuf al-Qadi and there was Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, rahimahumullah. May Allah bestow mercy on them. He used to like stay up long nights till he couldn't keep his eyes up, and he used to keep a bucket next to him. And every time he'd fall asleep, he'd grab the bucket and sort of like throw water on his face. And he's continuing to work through his research on, you know, what if this issue happens, hypotheticals, then the ruling would be that. What if this happens? The ruling would be that. Okay, this hadith, but like, what about that narrator? But so-and-so said about him different than what he said. He's working through, right, research. And he keeps throwing freezing water on his face, and people are telling him, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? Like, get some rest. You're killing yourself. He says, how can I? The Muslims say that if sort of we get stuck on an issue, Muhammad ibn Hassan is going to help us. They're depending on me, so how can I let them down, right? Or Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, when he says, you know, when I first finally got my big break, he left Nawa and he was relocated to the stronghold of the scholars, Damascus of Syria. He said, I spent 2 years not laying my side on the ground. Every time, so sleep would overtake him, he'd lean over on a pile of books, then he would come to again, right? And Al-Badr ibn Juma'ah himself is the one that testifies that he entered his room, his quarters, and he found him this way. You know, Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, they say about him, it'll be the last quick example I give, but the Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, they said that he would sit after Fajr and teach all of his classes. And he was like a polymath. He was a man that was a master of like every science that was pursued by the scholars. And so like the hadith scholars would come and he would sort of teach them what he had for the day. Then they would leave and the grammarians would come and he'd teach them the Arabic grammar as it was before sort of the cross contamination that happens between societies. And then they would leave. And then the people of usul, like legal theory, would come and he would teach them. The narration says, until the sun is high in the sky. So imagine like Fajr, he's going to 10, 11 a.m. He said, and then he would get on his riding animal to get to wherever he needs to be. And by that time, his shoe had filled like a cup with blood. Like he wasn't just sitting on a couch or sort of, no, he actually had a hemorrhoidal condition, right? And so he was bleeding out as he was teaching. And there are similar stories about Imam Malik rahimahullah or Al-Bukhari, Muhammad ibn Hatim al-Warraq, the scribe who Imam al-Bukhari would dictate to. He says, Imam al-Bukhari, every time he would think of something, like a light bulb moment, he would wake up. You know, not wake up and like turn on your phone. No, put it in your notes. No. You have to sort of go make sparks to turn on your lantern. He would wake up, turn on his lantern, write that down so he doesn't forget it, go make wudu again and go back to sleep. So you sleep upon wudu because that's the sunnah. Muhammad ibn Hatim al-Warraq says that Imam al-Bukhari used to do that like 20 times a night. It's like, I gotta capture this. I gotta capture that. And so if this is their norm, right? This is their khuluq. This is how they operate. Imagine someone finds something to detract from them and then they use it. The Prophet ﷺ would not let them do that with the camel, al-qaswa. The qaswa is usually not stubborn. I will not let you call her stubborn. How about the great ulama of our deen, whose mistakes or whose oversights drown in the ocean of the knowledge they taught the world and in their ocean of virtue. And then also in the sight of Allah now, you become the reason for the world being discouraged or doubtful about taking from this great scholar. And one of the ancient words of wisdom they include here is that they say, وَلَيْتَنَا أَدْرَكْنَا بَعْضَ صَوَابِهِمْ أَوْ كُنَّا مِمَّنْ يُمَيِّزُ خَطَأَهُمْ. If only we could have been of those that were as right as they were. If only we could be right as many times as they were right. That's one. He said, and two, if only we were able to actually discern when they were wrong. Like you'll never be right as much as them. And the times you say they're wrong, you actually don't say that because you know it. You say that because you think it. And you know when you say this because you think, you're assuming, that means even if you're correct in identifying a scholar's mistake, you're still incorrect. Because you don't have proof and reason enough to know you were right. Does that make sense? And so now let's think of the big picture. This scholar says something wrong. Okay? He already got the reward for trying his best. And we got the sin for detracting from this scholar's dignity by highlighting this mistake of theirs, right? And for something Allah will reward them for, right? And for keeping people away from them, right? And then this scholar may show up on the Day of Judgment not just with the reward of trying his best, but the reward of all of this that you've done against him. And then later on, the scholar may have corrected himself, which means he'll get that reward as well, and you'll get none of it. And I read to you prior the statement of Abdullah al-Mubarak, rahimahullah ta'ala, who said, من استخف بالعلماء ذهبت آخرته ومن استخف بالأمراء ذهبت دنياه ومن استخف بالإخوان ذهبت مروءته. Whomever belittles the scholars jeopardizes their hereafter, and whomever belittles the rulers jeopardizes their worldly life, meaning they'll execute you. And whomever underestimates, looks down upon their brothers, they do away with their own self-respect or their manliness. And Ja'far ibn Sulaiman rahimahullah used to say, we're closing out here inshallah here. Ja'far ibn Sulaiman rahimahullah said, I heard Malik ibn Dinar rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him, say, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ شَرًّا أَلَّا يَكُونَ صَالِحًا وَهُوَ يَقَعُ فِي الصَّالِحِينَ. It's enough evil that has gathered within a person that they are not righteous and they attack those who are righteous. And then finally he says this, this is at like a half page here just to finish our discussion on scholarship altogether. He says, لا يجرحون العلماء إلا ليتبين الحق ويعرف الصحيح. And if they're going to correct them, they make their intentions clear to the people as to why they're doing that. So people don't misunderstand. They don't think this is a personal attack. Yahya ibn Sa'id said, it was said to Yahya ibn Sa'id, are you not afraid that these people whom you said are not worthy of accepting their hadith, worthy as transmitters of hadith, narrators in the chain, will dispute with you in front of Allah? And so he said, that is more beloved to me than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam being my opponent and saying, لِمَ حَدَّثْتَ عَنِّي حَدِيثًا تَرَى أَنَّهُ كَذِبٌ. Why are you narrating about me something that you believe to be incorrect? Meaning the only reason I would put myself on opposite sides, disagree with the scholar, is that I don't want to be in disagreement with who? With the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And some of the Sufi scholars said to Ibn al-Mubarak, after he had criticized al-Ma'la ibn Hilal, they said to him, Taghtab, are you backbiting? This, our sheikh? And he said, be silent. إِذَا لَمْ تُبَيِّن كَيْفَ نَعْرِفُ الْحَقَّ مِنَ الْبَاطِلِ. If you don't clarify things for people, how will they ever know what's correct from what's incorrect? And a Shafi'i, Ibn Mubarak is saying that a Shafi'i used to say this is not backbiting. It is reported that Yahya, I'm drawing a blank. Not Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan. Yahya ibn Ma'in, the lifelong friend, hadith scholar of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah. He used to say, there is nothing more difficult on me than criticizing people. I mean, he means as narrators, like qualified, not qualified. It's not a personal attack. He's saying there's nothing I hate more than having to criticize someone that could have already taken his seat in Jannah. Like this person could already be in Jannah, and I'm down here saying, don't take from him. like nothing harder on me. He's saying, but this is an amana. This is not about righteous or not righteous. This is about how accurate, how strong the memory, how precise, that sort of thing when it comes to the ahadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Ah, yes. I promise you this is the last one. Last athar. Al-Hasan ibn Ali said from Abu Salih al-Gharra that I mentioned to Yusuf ibn Asbat from Waqi' something about the ahadith regarding the end times and Amr al-Fitan, Akhir Zaman. And so he said to me, Yusuf ibn Asbat said to me, ذاك يشبه أستاذه الحسن ibn Hayy. He says these narrations don't add up. These resemble the narrations of this other guy, Al-Hasan ibn Hayy, meaning throw them out. And so they said to Yusuf ibn Asbat, Yusuf ibn Asbat was very close to Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, just to give you a feel. They said to Yusuf ibn Asbat, أَمَا تَخَافُ أَن تَكُونَ هَذِهِ غِيبَةً. Like just throw it all out, like dismiss the guy altogether. You're not afraid that this is backbiting? The scholars. So he said to me, لِمَا يَا أَحْمَقْ. You fool, why would you think that? Why would you say something like this? أَنَا خَيْرٌ. This is so wonderful. أَنَا خَيْرٌ لِهَؤُلَاءِ مِنْ آبَائِهِمْ وَأُمَّهَاتِهِمْ. I'm doing a greater service to these people than their own mothers and fathers. Remember we said moms and dads take care of you in this world? I'm protecting him. My niyyah is I'm protecting him from being a transmitter of something not to be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ. He's saying, I am better for them than their mothers and fathers. I'm doing a better service for them than their moms and dads. وَأَنَا أَنْهِي النَّاسَ أَنْ يَعْمَلُوا بِمَا أَحْدَثُوا فَتَتْبَعُهُمْ أَوْزَارُهُم. I am preventing the people from acting upon these things that have no basis in their religion that would cause these people to carry those sins. I'm doing him a favor. وَمَنْ أَطْرَاهُمْ كَانَ أَضَرَّ عَلَيْهِمْ. And the people that told them to casually transmit these things are the ones that hurt them, not me. I'm helping them, not hurting them. So these were their intentions, and it's one thing to claim it, but it's another thing to actually do it correctly and sincerely. So when we speak of our scholars, we speak with reverence, we speak with love. It will be critical if we're qualified to criticize, but it will never be without love. Lovingly and critically for those that are equipped with the instruments to engage in this intellectual discourse objectively and sincerely. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa sallallahu sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakallahu khairan.